In 2022, Rob Manfred announced that the pitch clock would be making its way to Major League Baseball. Immediately, there was a rift between fans, creating supporters and opposers of the new rule. Those in favor of the new rule believed that pace and play and viewership numbers would benefit. Meanwhile, the opposition dreaded that injuries would uptick following the implementation of the pitch clock. In the end, which side was correct? Before Rob Manfred was the commissioner of baseball, Bud Selig sat atop that throne. He was one of the most beloved and respected commissioners in all of sports. Because of his reputation, Manfred knew that he had to live up to high expectations as a hand-picked successor of Selig. His main goal after bursting onto the scene was to increase viewership and improve on the increasing average age of the fans of his sport. Heading into his tenure as the head man of the MLB, baseball was seen as a dying sport that only old people enjoy watching. Manfred took exception to this and experimented with many controversial rules in the minor and major leagues. His first order of business was to keep batters in the batter's box for as long as possible, banning hitters from taking both feet out during an at-bat. This was a complete disaster. At first, many big leaguers struggled to make this change a habit. However, those who broke the rules did not see any punishment for their rule-breaking tendencies, and this change completely died off. While this rule technically still exists to this day, much of the league does not care and still receives no punishment for their rule breaking. Most of his other experiments were toyed with in the lower levels prior to making the big jump. Before the pitch clock, there were a few new rules that were successes in terms of what he was trying to accomplish. These rules include pitch com, which allows catchers to relay pitches to the pitcher without risking opponents stealing signs, runners being placed on second in extra innings, and limiting the amount of times coaches can take visits to the mound during games. The pitch clock was his latest invention and quickly made its way to the majors in 2023. While Manfred expected the pitch clock to be a huge hit, fans and players felt the opposite. The players, specifically, were skeptical going in, which normally happens when change is forced onto people. After a few months into the 2023 season, many notable pitchers around the league had succumbed to injuries. These players included 2020 AL Cy Young Award winner Shane Bieber, Braves breakout Spencer Strider, and up-and-coming superstar Yuri Perez, to name a few. Following these injuries, players had differing opinions on the matter. Justin Verlander was quoted on the Daily Evergreen calling it a pandemic. On an article written by David Larilla of Fangraphs, he interviewed 13 pitchers and asked for their opinions on the pitch clock. A large majority of their responses essentially summed up that some pitchers have it harder than others, and adjusting accordingly is the most important aspect. Shane McClanahan of the Tampa Bay Rays had this to say: "I think it's relative. It's unique to the individual on the mound. If you're used to working a little slower, it might be a little more laborious or strenuous to get through 7 innings, as opposed to someone who is accustomed to throwing more quickly." Jack Flaherty had a bit of a different opinion, expressing that there is a significant change. He said, "You're training the body to do something different than what it's done for a long time. It is less time between pitches now, less time between hitters. When you get into longer at-bats, you're taught to slow the game down, take another few seconds and whatnot, and now you can't do that. So, from a math standpoint, number of pitches in X amount of time, it's different on the body." The MLBPA is a union that represents the players around the league, expressing the opinion of the majority in meetings and so forth. Tony Clark, the chief of the MLBPA, issued a statement during the season claiming that the pitch clock was causing injuries. The statement read as follows: "Despite unanimous player opposition and significant concerns regarding health and safety, the Commissioner's Office reduced the length of the pitch clock last December, just one season removed from imposing the most significant rule change in decades. Since then, our concerns about the health impacts of reduced recovery time have only intensified. The league's unwillingness thus far to acknowledge or study the effects of these profound changes is an unprecedented threat to our game and its most valuable asset, the players." MLB fired right back, responding with a claim of their own. This statement ignores the empirical evidence and much more significant long-term trend over multiple decades of velocity and spin increases that are highly correlated with arm injuries. Nobody wants to see pitchers get hurt in this game, which is why MLB is currently undergoing a significant comprehensive research study into the causes of this long-term increase, interviewing prominent medical experts across baseball, which to date has been consistent with an independent analysis by Johns Hopkins University that found no evidence to support that the introduction of the pitch clock has increased injuries. In fact, JHU found no evidence that pitchers who worked quickly in 2023 were more likely to sustain an injury than those who worked less quickly on average. JHU also found no evidence that pitchers who sped up their pace were more likely to sustain an injury than those who did not. The National Library of Medicine performed a study to figure out if the pitch clock led to an increase in injuries, just like fans and players were claiming. This study used Fangraph's database for injuries. They found that there was actually a decrease in injuries following the addition of the pitch clock. Along with that decrease, there was no statistical difference in elbow injuries from the 2021 through 2023 seasons. Dan Szymborski, another Fangraphs researcher, did some extensive research on the pitch clock and its effects on the pitchers around the league. I will get to some more of his findings later, but for now I will leave you with this graphic, showing the likelihood for injury based on the increase in pace following the pitch clock. These numbers seem very unsupportive of a higher chance of injury for players that had to change the most. A more likely cause for the injuries to popular players around the league is the progressive mindset that high spin rate and velocity are the most desirable traits. Unfortunately, the numbers do back this way of thinking, as pitchers with nastier deliveries are usually more successful. Therefore, this mentality is unlikely to make its way out of baseball. In the year 2021, spin rates had hit a new peak, and the MLB had caught on with the fact that most pitchers were using illegal substances to aid in their search for more spin. After they cracked down on these sticky substances, players had to adjust, seemingly overnight. Tyler Glasnow, then a pitcher with the Rays, is known for his health concerns. He was also a known user of foreign substances and dealt with some troubles with his arm following the crackdown. He said, "I tried to go cold turkey. I woke up the next day and I was sore in muscles I didn't even know existed." While it seems odd that foregoing a substance could cause injury, many pitchers had to overcompensate by gripping the ball harder, which puts more strain on the forearm, making a pitcher more susceptible to an injury. The chase for spin rate and velocity is a more likely candidate for the cause of the injuries. Nate Schwartz of Pitcherlist figured that velocity might be dipping due to the pitch clock allowing less time to recover between pitches. Based on his hypothesis, he found some data that supported these claims, which show that the average fastball around the league dropped by 0.3 miles per hour with the bases empty. With runners on, the dip was by 0.2 miles an hour. The data also showed that 85% of pitchers that had to make a 5-second or larger change in between pitches had a velocity drop, which is conclusive evidence that adjusting more means sacrificing velo. If you look at WOBA, or weighted on-base average, to check on the overall production of a pitcher, hurlers that did not have to adjust as much had a better opportunity to prove their results based on this graphic. Now, heading back to Dan Szymborski's research I talked about earlier, he looked at FIP and ERA to compare the expected rate of change based on how much pitchers had to alter their delivery time to the plate. He found that there was very little relationship between the change in delivery and underperformance with FIP and ERA. However, he was reluctant to assume that these numbers had enough weight to be conclusive. While the pitch clock led to a lot of star pitchers around the league going down, this was clearly a coincidence, as the numbers show that there was a decrease in total injuries along with no difference in blows to the elbow. A more plausible blame for injuries is the chase for spin and velocity in baseball.